Hello, I'm Rachel Richards and welcome to Teenagers Untangled, the audio hug where we use research by experts and our own experience to discuss everything and anything to do with parenting teenagers.
Hi there, my name is Susie Asley. I'm a mindfulness coach, mindful therapist and musician and mother of 3 teenagers. 2 of them are twins.
As a parenting coach, mother of 2 teenagers and 2 bonus daughters, I've seen the transformative power of getting people together to share ideas and support each other. So here we are. Welcome to our club. Let's begin. Right, quick one, Susie. Do you know how many downloads we've had?
No.
Okay, so this isn't listens because the majority of people actually stream the show without downloading it. Over 60,000.
What? That's crazy.
I know, it's amazing.
Wow.
And that's in 129 different countries.
Crikey.
Most of which I probably have never been to.
Yeah, I was going to say, can I name 129 countries?
I'm really happy and I'd love to meet you all.
Amazing.
Yes,
Yeah.
how incredible.
Welcome.
So it just goes to show that the things that we're talking about and struggling with are worldwide problems. You're not alone, and all of us parents go into these things and think, oh, okay, how am I supposed to do this, right? Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, Susie, we've been contacted by a lovely lady who would like to remain anonymous.
Sure.
Her problem is one that gets a huge amount of judgment from other parents, but genuinely needs support. She says her son seems to have fallen in with a group that are all taking a lot of risks, like stealing from shops and verbally abusing others. The police have been involved. The school has cancelled some privileges and his parents have even taken him to apologise in person and pay for damages after he broke a car window by throwing a stone.
Gosh.
She says it's like no amount of talking, sanctions, of threats of police appear to be resonating with him. There's almost a feeling of him not caring, and there's a definite need to fit in with this group and be seen as cool.
Yeah.
And
gosh, that must be stressful for her.
I think it is. I think it's very stressful for any parent for all sorts of reasons. So I'm going to talk you through the excellent international research into teenage delinquency. I hate to use the word, but that is kind of what this is.
Yeah.
And what the experts know about it.
Yeah.
Then the one thing we know that definitely reduces it. And also top tips for how to manage it as a parent. So, but first, let's talk about our nuggets. Go on, Susie. What have you got for us this week?
I'll shoot first. So it's half term here. We have lots of people in the house, which is really lovely. And there was a minor incident last night that I didn't feel comfortable with. And it was the idea that how do you manage that when it happens in the moment and you're not prepared?
Yes, very often we're not.
Yeah, and I don't need to go into the details of what it was, but it's the idea that, you know, we think we've thought things in advance and we have, but then something happens, how do you deal with it? And when I believe when there are other teenagers around, you know, unless it's dangerous or really needs stopping, then it's better to wait. So I dealt with the situation and it dissolved. And then it's the idea of me going away, and before I speak to my kids later, what do I really think about it? How can I be as clear as possible in a grounded way, so I'm not shooting from the hip or being reactive, but so I really know what my boundaries are and give them clear guidance that's non-negotiable, but hear what they have to say, and you know they're welcome to have an input. So it's kind of, how do you deal with it in the moment and then go away and reflect upon it so that you can manage it properly, so it feels resolved, but with flexibility that we can revisit it again.
So great, because as a parent we need to remove our own emotional reactions and give ourselves time to, because quite often we come up against problems and you just haven't thought about it before, and actually being able to then say to them, so you tell me why what you think happened, what happened there, how's this working, so you have more information, but at the start of that conversation, you already have some clear ideas about where your values lie and how you feel about it.
So I felt I couldn't address it this morning, because there were still lots of teenagers around, and I don't think that's a very good idea. They can't really hear it. And B, because I wasn't really that clear on what I think, and I'm still not 100%, so I'm going to go home and have a think about it, and when we talk about it, I will first of all hear the facts, what actually happened, from anyone, without judgment, and then this is what I think about it. What do you think? And then be really clear.
Yes. And we need to teach our kids that you don't have to have a response immediately.
No, and actually to wait and do it when you're calm, and you've got your rational head on.
Yeah, exactly.
It's much better. Yeah.
So for me, my daughter said something that I thought was really profound the other day. She said she would never consider stopping her revision or her other work to watch an episode of a favourite show, because these are sort of 30, 45 minutes. And she'd said, that I'd be committing that much time. And yet she'd happily flick over to Instagram, or she's not really a TikToker, but, she's these social media things, Snapchat, and just kind of dip in and then find out 45 minutes later, that's where she's been. And she said, she might as well have watched the show.
Yeah, too.
And I think, yes, exactly. And I thought, gosh, that's so profound what she's just said there, because I think what we need to do is we need to make ourselves think, before we actually turn to something, think, how much time am I genuinely going to commit? And is that actually going to happen? Am I prepared to say that this might end up being half an hour?
Yeah, and be really careful with the social media one, because that is the whole problem, isn't it? I mean, she's hit the nail on the head. It's, there is nothing wrong with going on social media, in my opinion.
Of course.
But it's getting stuck in it that's the problem, and that is what it's designed to do. So you go in thinking, nobody goes in thinking, I'm going to spend 3 hours on it, do they? No. You go in thinking, I'm just going to check, I'll be 5 minutes. And then, like she experiences, it's loads of time's gone.
And I love that she's aware of that.
Yeah, brilliant. Amazing.
Now, back to our anonymous guest who contacted us via social media. So there's one of the benefits. It's widely agreed among experts that the greatest threats to the well-being of young people in industrialised societies come from preventable and often self-inflicted causes. Like car and other accidents account for nearly half of all fatalities amongst American youth. It's violence, drug, alcohol use, sexual risk-taking, you name it. So what do we know? There are studies that have sort of pinpointed what's going on. We do know for sure, because we now have accurate information about what's happening to the teenage brain in the teenage years. And we talk about it all the time. The prefrontal cortex isn't developed, and they call it dopaminergic responses. Your reward system is having a massive change. And that's why the risk-taking happens, because there's a lot of remodeling of this brain's reward system. Testosterone, that plays a fun role. It increases significantly, and it can fuel a boy's appetite for unhealthy risk-taking. But it's not just boys who take risks.
No,
let's be clear about this. They are crazy. And then there's peer pressure. And teens have a really strong need to be accepted and affirmed by their peers. And this is one of the things that really feeds into girls as well. Yeah. And research has found that peer pressure activates the reward receptors in the brain like a drug. Yeah,
and like we've mentioned lots of times before, it's the people they surround themselves with that have the biggest influence. It's no longer us.
Absolutely. And there's a great study that showed how when boys were given a simulated driving game, they found that there was the adolescent years when they would take more risks if they were being watched by their peers. This completely changed in the adult years. Yeah. Right? Interesting. Yeah. I'm sure there must be some who would, because we've seen those men.
We know those people.
Yeah, all those people. The brain scans show that having peers watching amplifies the activity in your incentive processing system.
Yeah, I can totally believe that.
And particularly the boys who had their girlfriend sitting next to them were much calmer, took fewer risks. If the girlfriend wasn't in the room, they would still take the risks. Yep. If an attractive girl came into the room, oh yes, they'd take the risk.
I have seen all of those in my own house. It's amazing.
It's so interesting. And, we can kind of relate to this. Yeah. And like I said, I don't think it's just boys. So
no, it isn't.
And actually, we know that human beings, when they are in a group, will make far worse decisions. Right. Absolutely. So we even know that this is an international human thing.
Yes,
it's a group bad decision making.
Much more pronounced in teenagers.
Yes, exactly. So there's an excellent academic paper on this in Science Direct. In fact, there were two, and I'm going to reference both because one came out in 2008 and one came out rather later. So scary stuff. We know that they're risk takers. Now, quickfire quiz.
Okay.
Using the data cited in this article that I read. Yeah. This is the second article I read. In the developed world, has teen smoking increased, stayed the same, or reduced between the late 90s and 2015? Teen smoking.
Well, I'd say decreased, but now you're asking me the question. I'm now unsure.
Okay. What about the prevalence of binge drinking?
Oh, I'm not sure. Increased.
Juvenile offending?
Increased.
Teenage pregnancies?
Decreased.
Okay. So,
What did I get?
really interesting answer. So, throughout much of the developed world, adolescent smoking, drinking, underage sex, and juvenile crime declined dramatically
Okay.
between the late 90s and around 2015. Poof.
Wow.
Okay,
They
so
all
we
decreased.
all fear that, yes.
Wow.
And this is the funny thing, because I read the first piece of research that was done by this I think it's Lawrence Steinberg, who's the guy in adolescent understanding research. Okay. The first piece of research said all these governments are spending lots and lots of money on programs to teach adolescents how to protect themselves and that they shouldn't behave in these certain ways. None of it's working. All right. That was what he said then. And then this later study, which is a meta-analysis, so it's a study of lots of studies, shows this.
Shows the opposite.
And well, it's not that it's not, he wasn't right. It's that it's changed.
Yeah.
Okay. So in Europe, based on a 30-country average, daily smoking in 15 to 16-year-olds declined from a peak of 26% in 99 to 10% in 2019.
Yeah, that's
especially strong in Nordic countries.
Yeah.
Prevalence of heavy episodic drinking declined markedly from 2000 in the US, followed by Australia, New Zealand, Netherlands. Declines ranged from around 40% in the Netherlands to about 55% in England and Australia and 65% in the USA.
Okay.
All right. Rates of juvenile offending declined by between 40 and 80% from recent peaks in the USA,
Whoa.
New Zealand, Australia, the Netherlands, and England.
That's incredible.
It's a particularly steep decrease since about 2008.
Wow.
Rates of teen pregnancy.
Yeah, they've
fallen
really gone down. I
dramatically.
know that.
E-cigarette use.
Up. Massively.
That's a complete trend bucker, right?
Yeah.
That one is that's risen sharply since around 2016. Yeah. So we know that's the big issue. But I wanted to put some good news in here because the truth is this is all reduced.
Yeah.
Why? They don't really know. So I started looking at these figures and, it's really interesting because even the experts aren't entirely sure. What they do know is that unstructured time with friends is strongly associated with substance use and delinquency.
Okay.
So, for example, nearly 80% of US 10th graders, 15 to 16-year-olds, reported going to parties at least once a month during the 90s, but by 2017, this had fallen to about 57%. So quite a significant decline. It's a bit sad, really, isn't it? But this is true, right? Yeah. Declines in face-to-face socializing have been empirically linked to declines in adolescent risk behavior in both North America and Europe. So it's unstructured time.
Yeah, where you have your mates and they go, oh, let's go do that.
Yes. And a study by Borodovsky and all in 2021 concluded that declines in unstructured in-person socializing accounted for about 86% of declines in risk behavior.
Wow. So what they're not having that time because they're on screens, they're doing other things.
Life has changed. So first of all, coming back to this lady straight away, really it's unstructured time with other kids. Yeah. Is just a fertile ground for misbehavior.
And this group, and depending on the people in the group.
Exactly. So a paper I read pointed out that we expect heavy internet users to be less engaged in risk behaviours than peers with more time on their hands, yeah?
Yeah, that would make sense.
The opposite is true.
Okay.
Heavy internet users, particularly social media users, are more likely to smoke and drink than those who rarely use the internet. Okay. So it's really confusing, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really confusing.
So, and this is the problem. A lot of studies are trying to pinpoint what's going on.
Yeah.
One study investigated whether a rise in computer gaming was empirically linked to declining adolescents binge drinking in 6 Nordic countries. No association.
No. Okay.
Right. So we sort of instinctively think, oh, we know what it is, and we don't.
No.
Right.
Gosh, that's so interesting.
Another avenue that they addressed was, so this is Dottie Sand and Trees pointed out that parents are spending more time with their children.
Okay. Yes.
D'Souza and I've got all this research in the podcast notes, but they pointed out there's a decreasing use of corporal punishment and lots more parental monitoring over the past 20 years.
That's interesting.
So they say, maybe this is it.
Yeah. Yeah,
got the
that's
proof.
interesting. That's really interesting.
The demographic profile of parents has changed markedly.
Yeah.
Parents are older, better educated. Fathers are typically more involved with parenting in many countries. Right?
And our emotional intelligence has increased massively.
Yes. The proportion of adolescents reporting they feel emotionally close to both parents has increased.
Yeah. That would make a lot of sense if that's the reason, or at least part of the reason.
Yeah. But before we become all smug, increased family connectedness was not found to be the significant factor in risk behaviour decline in New Zealand and Australian studies.
Darn it.
A study of 30 European countries concluded that changes in parental control and support were not associated with declining adolescent drinking within or between countries. Dang.
How are they doing this research?
I know, I think they're wrong.
I think they're wrong, yeah.
So there's another option. It's interesting, isn't it? Many of the things that mark the transition to adulthood, like gaining a driver's license, getting a job, leaving home, getting married, are happening later in life.
Yeah.
Adolescents are growing up slower. And they propose that because of this, they're less exposed to having access to things they could do that would get them into trouble. Like you're drinking later, you're having sex later.
Yeah, and your brain is a bit more developed by the time you get around to it. Yeah.
And that the symbolic meaning of adulthood may have changed. So now it represents to young people a loss of security and the end of all the fun, right? Because they're looking at how the job market's insecure and how the world's on fire. And, you know, I think I might just stay an adolescent for longer.
Yeah, that's
and so they're in no hurry to grow up.
No.
We still don't know.
No.
Okay. Pressure to succeed, increased school engagement.
Yep.
So future orientation is associated with health promoting behaviour, according to Whitehead and all.
Yeah.
Qualitative research indicates some people see drinking and a party lifestyle is incompatible with their academic, sporting or career ambitions.
Okay.
There's evidence of increasing schoolwork pressure in European countries since 2009. Yep. In the US, in 2019, a study showed that 15 to 17-year-olds spent twice as much time on homework in 2019 than in their mid-1990s counterparts, which is, I would say that's true because we didn't really do that much.
So they're not doing
homework.
risk-taking behaviours, but they're already depressed and stressed and anxious. Great.
Just make your child want to kill themselves and they won't go and do all these things. It's not true. In fact, that's not true either. That's not true.
Okay.
A recent study of 37 mainly European countries has demonstrated an empirical link between increasing schoolwork pressure and declining alcohol consumption. So... What do we know? There are lots of reasons.
Tune in 5 years and we'll give you the answers.
Yes. So the truth is, look, I don't have an answer for why this has happened, that this has happened.
Very interesting, though.
And we do know that kids are spending far less time together.
Yeah.
And here's the really interesting thing. This lady who contacted us, she said to me that she has an only child and she had encouraged him to spend time with his friends in real life because she was happy that he wasn't on his own in his room doing the things that we know are not healthy.
Yes.
And the online is not a safe environment as well.
No.
Okay, so we know that it's really healthy for them to spend time together. I think the problem is the unstructured time.
And the group that you pick to hang out with, that's really like the biggest influence in a teenager's life is the 5 people they surround themselves with.
Exactly. So, and we have done an episode, I forget which number it is, on what do you do if you don't like your teens' friends?
Yeah.
And it's definitely not, badmouth them and try and separate them from them. What we suggested was that you have the ability to shut down their access to them in unfettered situations where they don't have anybody, a parent around. Yeah. So one of the good things is to invite them around to your house in the hope they don't destroy your own house. But so that's one of the things that is a feasible option. Yeah. I've always said to my girls, my preference, and I've mentioned this in our podcast before, when they said, what age can I do X, Y, Z? And I've always said, my preference is you have as much freedom as possible. Yeah. I want you to be out there doing things. Yeah, being independent. But I reserve the right at any moment in time to withdraw privileges on the basis that I think you're not ready and I've overstepped your freedom. And I will blame myself. So I will say, I'm very, very sorry for letting you have too much time. I thought you were ready and you're not. And then I pull them back in again.
But I imagine this poor lady, and I imagine she's also sort of blaming herself, which
No.
feels awful, and she shouldn't. But these things build, don't they? So you don't know it's going on until it's really
until
big.
the police come round.
Yeah,
Yes,
and so that's really,
absolutely.
really hard, really challenging.
And she's done everything. She's tried
I'm sure.
contacting the other
amazing.
parents
Yeah.
to talk to them. They've all said they've witnessed the adolescent behaviour becoming unruly.
Yeah, that's a really good way of doing it. Getting the other adults involved, and then maybe putting some guidelines in, some boundaries in, and this as a group, as a team.
Yes,
because
yes.
That's maybe the only way they'll change their behaviour.
And it's good for kids to have to take healthy risks.
Yeah.
So what do healthy risks look like? It's rewarding and relatively safe things like sport pursuits, artistic, creative pursuits, volunteer activities, travelling, making all sorts of things, entering competitions. These things are put in place to give our kids an outlet for their creative and emotional and their energy.
Yeah, and we all know, don't we? You get out of your comfort zone. That's really healthy. If you stay in your comfort zone, that's when you become anxious and don't want to do anything.
Exactly.
That's not healthy.
And then the unhealthy risks are things like trolling on social media, sexting, inappropriate social activities, smoking. So, we know what these things are.
Yeah.
And so we're probably all thinking, oh yeah, whatever. What do we do? Do you have any, off the top of your head things because you've said a couple of really useful things there.
Yeah.
There can be underlying factors, for example.
Absolutely. And there can be things that, the kids in the background of some other stuff, or there might be one particular kid in the group who maybe has no boundaries or has some sort of learning disability that means he's less able or she's less able to know what is okay and safe or unsafe. And then they, that ripples out into the group because they're so impressionable and it's so exciting. I don't know, if I was in that situation, I would probably contact the other parents and first port of call, like how do we manage this as a team? Like it takes a village kind of thing.
Yes.
And see that went. If that didn't help, then there may be a restrict time with that group, that particular group. But that's going to cause a conflict with the kid. So it's first and foremost, as we talk about in anything, is building up your connection with your own kid. And it sounds like there is connection, which is amazing and brilliant. So that's a great starting block. Build on that connection and, just keep going that way and getting the other parents involved so that you can manage it as a team.
And I think with this lady, she said that her son gets very upset when he realizes how it's upsetting her.
Yeah.
So he is emotionally, conversant with her feelings.
The draw of the peer pressure is too big.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think to protect him, I would say, so I'm your parent and my job is to keep you safe through this developmental phase and actually to take all the sense of shame out of it, that there's something broken about him. Yes. You say this is typical of brain development issues and it looks like I need to keep you safer for longer to support you so that he doesn't feel like he's a bad person for
there is a risk in that he won't like that and he'll just go, we'll stuff you, and then go off and be even worse. So it's kind of it's a really careful balancing act.
Yes.
But if the connection is there, it sounds like that's
and you don't want to take all the responsibility for it because you can't control your child's behaviour. You can only control your response to it.
Yeah.
And I would say take your emotions out of the equation as the first point. So you can listen to episode 37 on how not to overreact because you will feel like overreacting. This will be very, very challenging.
Yeah, really challenging.
Get to the why. Number 2. Often teens struggle to identify why they're behaving the way they're doing or what they're feeling. So we need to talk to them about what's happening when they're in that group and who's making the decisions. Actually, I took my daughter to the Old Bailey, which is our biggest law court in the country. And we watched the case of, I think it was 5 youths, boys, who were in the dock for the stabbing of and murder of one boy. And the reason 5 of them were in the dock, one of whom was, I think he was 14, who looked like a little puppy, poor kid, is because in the UK, the law now is if you're in a group, you're all responsible.
Right.
So, making it clear that there are, in some countries, laws that will hold you responsible for what your group does.
Yeah.
So getting to the why, increasing the nurture, so showing them that you're there with them, that you're there to support them, you're not trying to punish them. And episode 3 gives lots of good tips about how to actually get your son to talk, because I know you said that it can be really tricky.
It can be hard.
And episode 14 looks at how to set rules they'll follow.
Yeah.
And it is about having a contract together. So you need to kind of unpick this.
Yeah, and if a kid can do something that is hurting somebody else, and it doesn't sound like that they're hurting other people, it sounds like it's property and stuff, but there's a hurt in it, isn't there?
I think some of the things he's done has.
Yeah, okay. Then there's a disconnect somewhere, because no healthy, balanced human being that is, really in tune with themselves, and I'm not saying that he's, way out there, but there's something that is a disconnect, and we all have that at points. So it's kind of helping him to tune back in. Nobody hurts another human being if they're fully connected. You just don't. It's the disconnect that means we can do things to other people, and then we can push it to one side or not really feel
the otherness, like they're dehumanizing other people.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's tuning back in a gentle way, and that's through connection.
And prioritizing your child's safety.
Yeah.
First and foremost, so that's the number 3. So locking down free time if you need to. We need to hold our child accountable for their actions. Episode 32 looks at the best way to set consequences. And that can be natural consequences. And sometimes that's legal or court involvement. And our heart plays tricks on us and says, well, maybe he didn't mean it. Maybe it won't happen again. If the police get involved, it could ruin his future. And
we don't want to escalate it as well, because then it's suddenly out of control. So it's a real balancing act.
But you can't work harder than your child.
No.
You need your child in the ring. You can use a behavioural contract. I've put one in the podcast notes. So if you want to sit your child down and say, here's what we expect, and you can think, what would I expect of next door neighbour's child if they were behaving in this way? And you can ask them. So you can say, okay, it's a kid next door who's done this. What would you want the adult to do? What would you want me to do?
Because they know what's right and wrong. It sounds like he's been brought up by loving parents.
Yes.
He knows what's right and wrong. So somewhere inside he's got his fingers in his ears, because it's more fun in the moment.
And I think that sense of community, because I remember my teenager giving me this sense that she thought, okay, so I've talked about it many, many episodes ago when they all sat in the park and she didn't drink, but they were.
Yeah.
And one of the ways I helped her was I said, darling, you live in this community. You may think you don't know the people around you, but they're going to clock you and they will think that's the girl who, or that's the boy who. Do you really want the community to think of you a certain way?
I know that there's a beautiful, I can't remember the name of it, but in some African communities, I was reading about it, when somebody does something wrong, they bring that person into the community, and they put them like in the middle of a big circle, and they tell them all the wonderful things about them.
Yes.
Tell them how amazing they are, how they are, and they put the blip that they've done, whatever it is, as an anomaly.
It's an anomaly.
You are not this person.
Exactly.
You are a beautiful person, and you can do this, this, and this. We love you. And this is not who you are. So we're going to support you and we're going to help you. And they don't do it again.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful way. And we do the opposite in our community.
Well, no, but I completely agree. And I think that that's the whole point. The point is that by bringing in the community and saying, we do actually have a community. I think the problem is our children are growing up, our teenagers are growing up in an environment where they feel the community's, you're online, but you can shut your device off and then no one sees you.
Or it's a finger-pointed community.
Or it's a finger-pointed community. But actually knowing that there are people around who genuinely care, who aren't going to call in the police or whatever, but who are just going to say, if you come around and apologise and they say, actually, that was upsetting. You did this to me. And then I've said sorry and now we move on. Yeah. And that's not who it doesn't define you.
No, it's really, really important that they understand there is a nurturing community, and it's quite hard to show them sometimes, isn't it? Because we don't see it.
But it is important because these things can escalate. And, I have seen incidences where, genuinely really terrible things start happening, and it's very hard as a parent. Also talking about your values as a family often. So I've always talked to my girls about the Richards being this, we're this, the Richards girls are this, because I think when we communicate our own values and we behave in a certain way, our kids know that they have an identity. They may not like that identity, but you can talk in those terms, and their job to change their behavior. They need to, we have to uphold our values and show them what we really think matters. And that can make them uncomfortable about doing something that's not really who they are as part of their family.
Absolutely. And get them to tune in and understand, their own reactions, because the draw of the peer pressure, being in that group that's saying, oh, let's do that. We've all been there.
Yes.
They'll do it because it's really fun. It's really exciting. And the consequences go out the window. They don't think about them. So if they can have like a 1 or 2% foundation of, actually, this doesn't feel great, then there's a chance they might go, no, let's not do that, guys. Let's do this instead.
Absolutely. And trying to kind of give your feedback in the group, because those are the other things. So the other key thing is giving them the words to say no. So beforehand. Yes. So how do you get out of a difficult situation? Yes. And also, what makes a good friend? Yeah. So get them to talk to you about, why do you like your mates? Yeah. What's important? What isn't important? How do you know that things are going well? So that they can start to identify these things, because they don't think about this stuff.
No, they don't. I ask mine sometimes, what role are you in the group?
Yes,
or
I love
what
that.
are your, and because I know their mates quite well, the 15-year-olds. What role is so-and-so? What role is so-and-so?
That's a really good one.
Really
I like
fun.
that.
And they go, I'm not sure. They always think they're the funny one.
I wish I was the funny one. Yeah, that's great. I love that. That's a really, really easy way to prompt them to think about, because I think roles are really easy shorthand. The truth is, we also need to get the right help. If they are showing signs that they're truly becoming delinquent, whether it's drug taking, whatever they're doing, don't wait. Get help. There are support. There are numbers you can call. There are GP. Speak to your GP. Speak to the school, so that the school knows. You need a trail of things you've done to try and get support.
Yeah, and people keep the feeling for the kid that there are other people watching out.
Yes.
In a nurturing way, not necessarily in a pointy finger way.
Yes, and people don't want kids to go off the rails, genuinely. So whatever we can do early on to support them and make them say, this isn't who you are. Yeah. This is just something you've done because your brain's not really well developed yet, and give them a chance to get back on track.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty much, getting kids to change, getting anyone to change is hard. Again, you can listen to the one where we talked about making micro changes.
Yeah, because often it's a tweak, isn't it?
Tweak.
A little tweak is a big difference.
Yes. So have you struggled with any of these issues? Let us know your stories. We're very interested. One of our listeners did say that she's been struggling with her son online, and she's going to let me know a bit more about that, because it might help us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think the more we hear about, in fact, my husband flies airplanes, and there's a magazine, and there's a section in the magazine which is called I Laughed, and the acronym is I learnt about flying from that.
Oh, okay.
And it's where people tell the horrible stories about all the awful things they've ever done, and there are lots of them. So it's the same, right? So I laughed.
Yeah. Brilliant. Let's do that.
If you find this helpful, please tell your friends, tell other parents, tell the school. And you can subscribe. Please subscribe, because that actually does make a difference to whether we get noticed by other parents. You can also sign up to receive all the latest on our website, where there's a blog, reviews, links, and you can contact us that way. www.teenagersuntangled.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook. I'm terrible on Facebook. Susie can be reached for excellent advice
at www.amindful-life.co.uk, and you can book directly onto a free chat with me if you so wish, and hear what I do and whether it's for you, and anything you want to know.
Perfect. Right, that's it for now. Goodbye.
Bye for now.